Well, good afternoon, everybody, and a big welcome to the Celebrating Excellence in Aged Care webinar series hosted by the Governance Evaluator. This webinar series is focused on bringing to life some of the great solutions that leaders are implementing to address some of the challenges that aged care service providers are having. And these have been identified through annual governance evaluation processes, accreditation failures, spotlight put on us by the Royal Commission, and many other means as well. And we're going to identify how service providers are translating these areas of focus into practice, implementing systems and processes, and continuing to drive them to achieve positive outcomes. So we're really lucky today. We're delighted to be joined by Kerri Rivett, who's the CEO of Shepparton Villages. And Shepparton Villages is a non-for-profit, regionally based organisation which is just over 54 years old. The organisation consists of 305 residential care beds, 271 independent living units, home care program, and employs just over 450 staff. And I happen to know that they are one of the leading innovative aged care organisations in regional and rural areas. We're also very happy to welcome David Panter, and David is the CEO of ECH in Adelaide. ECH is the largest not-for-profit or the largest profit-for-purpose independent living and home care provider in South Australia, with almost 2,000 independent living units, over 104 villages, and supporting over 3,000 older people with a full range of home care services. And ECH employs over 700 staff. And equally, ECH is a significant driver of innovation and some really exciting things in this aged care environment. As you can see, they're both very different services, but what you'll discover today is the leaders of these organisations have a lot in common. So they'll share with us today some great insights, some great learnings, some tips and how-tos that they're implementing to address some of the challenges that aged care services providers are having. You know, some of those challenges around drop-in accreditation, being ready for that, being ready for your response to the Royal Commission, but more importantly, what are they doing just to become and continue to be excellent services? So both David and Kerri have achieved their board evaluation processes in 2018. And they've both got some interesting insights for building effective governance and structure and the ongoing journey of how to do that. And so how it's going to work today is I'm going to ask Kerri and David to talk to us all about their insights and their learnings for the areas that I'm going to bring up with them. So first of all, Kerri, if I may start with you, and welcome, and thank you so much for giving us your time today. But Kerri, I'd just love to ask you about your board evaluation process. And I know that this has been an ongoing commitment by the Shepparton Villages and yourself and your executive. And I was wondering if you could give me a couple of really good insights that you've gleaned about the importance of continuous review and development, and how this process has actually helped you prepare for accreditation, being Section 8 around governance, and your response to the Royal Commission.
Look, Fee, as you know, we've been through the board evaluation now, I think, for 3 years. We've done 2 evaluations with you, and they've actually been a great insight, and we've been able to identify areas that we actually need to actually do some more work around. And it's really helped the directors actually concentrate on where we actually need to do some work and improve in. One of the biggest learnings out of it is actually taking the board on a journey. And as continuous improvement always is, it's a journey. And aged care, we live in a very compliance world. So it helped us identify our major risks and put in place actions to mitigate those risks. So, and it's all about the systems and processes. Have we got the right systems and processes and the right people in place to be able to meet our risks? And that's what the board evaluation has actually done. And it's actually allowed the board to actually think more strategically and not so much into some of the operational bits of our business.
That's terrific, Kerri. Thank you. I love that notion that you've talked about as this is really a continuous journey, and it's just about continuing to have your things in place that remind you each year of what are we going to do to continue on that journey.
Yeah, and like, you know, we're a not-for-profit organisation, so our board consists of, our directors are people from our community, and they're leaders in our community, but they're not necessarily got all the skills that you would have as a director. So the evaluation is being able to move directors into that direction. And one of the outcomes of it is that about 90% of our directors have actually now done the director's course, which has been a huge assistance in getting their thinking shifted.
So thank you, Kerri. That's terrific. So David, it's also an ongoing commitment for your organisation, for ECH. And can you briefly tell me a couple of insights you've gleaned from this, but more importantly, how has it helped you be ready for accreditation and for your response to the Royal Commission?
I mean, I think for us at ECH, some similarities with Kerri and Shepparton Villages, but also some differences as well. We're an organisation that's going through a major transformation currently, because we made the decision now 5 years ago to divest from residential aged care. At that stage, we had 11 facilities, 1,200 licensed beds, and we decided to sell that part of the business in order to focus on our housing and our home care offering. So we are in that transition process where, when I arrived as chief exec 4 years ago to enact that transformation, all of our policies and procedures, for example, were all based within the context of residential aged care, not home care. And so we've had to go through a phase of adopting and adapting what we had. But now we're in the phase of building out from that in terms of the complexity, and I'll talk more about this later on, of the services we provide at home to enable people to carry on living at home and indeed have a good and respectful death at home if that's their wish. In terms of our board, yes, we're a not-for-profit or profit-for-purpose enterprise like Shepparton Villages. Have a different history with our board directors. We, back in the early 2000s, made the decision to pay significantly our directors. And so that did change the nature and the caliber of the directors. And so I feel very privileged that I've got a board, and I've got now almost 40 years of working in the sector in health and social care, and worked with many boards. And this is a board who are very able, and I would say about the best board I've ever worked with. Really understood their role with regard to strategy and governance. And so for them going through, when they were looking at evaluation, which was one of the topics in 2018, we have a formal evaluation of the board every couple of years. And so that was when we made the decision to work with yourselves and look in a more sort of thorough way at our overall governance arrangements and the evaluation of that. Given that the directors came with a lot of experience, we were doing things we felt in a fairly sophisticated way, but absolutely aware that we probably were getting some things wrong or not doing things as well as we could do. And so it's been a real eye-opener for my board, I have to say, and as you know, all of my board are qualified in terms of the director course, and a number of them teach in South Australia on the director program, and they've now been recommending your program to other boards because of how thorough it's been in challenging them, when I think, quite frankly, they didn't quite expect to be challenged in that way. So it's been a very positive experience from their perspective, and it's led to some significant outcomes for us, particularly during this phase of transformation.
Terrific, David. And from your perspective, and I know talking to both you and Kerri, you found that having reports that you could give for accreditation and evaluation was very helpful.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, we went through the accreditation, our triennial accreditation for our home care services in 2018. It was a useful contribution to that in terms of the assessors could see how we were evaluating the role of the board, how our governance framework did play out in practice, and that it was very real and dynamic, and that went to our favour in terms of the assessors, and we certainly had no difficulty in going through the accreditation process.
I think the new standards that are coming out, well, they've been approved. The new standards cover governance, and the aged care accreditation people will be looking at governance in more detail. Yeah.
I think you're right, looking more closely at governance. So that leads me on to the next area that I can't wait to ask you both about, because one of the things that heard was the areas of focus that both your boards realised that they needed to take. And I think probably it comes as no surprise for anybody that one of the first areas, of course, that was identified was enhancing the focus on clinical governance. And the clinical governance area related to the board's ability to lead on clinical governance and the organisation's culture of safety and quality, that they were able to show that they were genuinely partnering with their consumers, that they were able to show that the staff were being safe themselves or are safe and were delivering safe care, and that you had safety and quality systems in place, and most importantly that the board was assured by the kinds of quality reports that they were receiving. So one of the areas that was highlighted for both of you in your reviews as being a very important part of clinical governance was, of course, that genuinely partnering with our consumers. And as you both know, in our new accreditation standards, in our new single aged care quality framework, that is a significant focus. So, David, I thought I'd like to start with you by asking, what have you been doing to focus on clinical governance since your review? And in particular, what have you been doing around genuinely engaging with your consumers and bringing the voice of your consumer to the table, particularly given the difference of the nature of your organisation, i.e. looking after people in their homes?
Yeah, I mean, so this is very much at the sort of heart of our transformation, that as we've continued to develop our home care role, we have increasingly been dealing with a higher acuity of need in home care. And we've been running a specific program over the last 12 months as a research program to test out essentially for a group of individuals who are on a level 4 home care package, but are at that point where they're potentially thinking about transitioning to residential aged care, but want to stay at home. We've been working with them on continuing to provide them services, looking at what it takes clinically as well as cost terms in order to deliver the equivalent high-level care in home as opposed to residential, and then eventually have that good and respectful death at home. For my board to get into that space, they have had to rethink their approach to clinical governance, and so certainly the review highlighted it as being one of the sort of hot topics for them that they felt they really needed to get to grips with more than they had. Only one of my board come from a direct clinical background. A couple come from a social care background, but again, not dealing with the sort of acuity of care that we're now seeking to deliver through our home care programs. And so as a result of that being highlighted as a hot topic, it led to really good discussion in the board about how we then create some actions to be able to address the concerns that were raised through the evaluation process. That has led to a couple of different paths. One is the establishment of a clinical quality subcommittee to the board, which brings into that subcommittee a number of both clinicians and non-clinicians from outside of the organisation, to act almost as a discussion ground. So, for example, that committee is currently considering what is a good and respectful death at home. And the clinicians are bringing to the table from their experience what are the clinical factors that need to be in place. But the non-clinicians, lay people involved in that committee, are bringing more a sort of community sense of what might be acceptable, of boundaries around a good and respectful death at home. So we've got that in play as an action. And then more broadly, as part of our quality improvement process, we now have a group of 24, we're calling them people with lived experience as opposed to consumers. So they're people with lived experience, so they're either direct consumers of our services, or they are a next of kin or a family member to somebody who is experiencing our services. And that group of 24 are now our sort of quality reference group, who have a forum to be able to think through the issues we're grappling with and come up with their perspective on that. And then a number of that 24 we've structured our executive quality improvement and governance structure around different elements of our model of well-being, which pick up health and care, pick up social engagement and social well-being, pick up housing needs, financial needs. And so each of those working groups on those different topics are now also have members drawn from that pool of 24 in the reference group onto those committees, and so are actively participating as people with lived experience in helping us refine and develop our quality improvement program. And clearly clinical governance is an element of that quality improvement program. And we're sort of 6 months down the track of having implemented that, coming out of our evaluation. And I have to say, from my perspective as Chief Executive, it's going great guns. A lot of really good contribution. And I think specifically because we've got that group of 24, I think I've certainly had experience in other organisations where the consumer representative might be, a couple of people at most on a key committee. And often those people end up feeling alienated and not quite sure how to interact and overwhelmed by the professionals sitting around the table. Within what we've now developed, I'm very confident that the members with lived experience are able to really contribute and not feel intimidated or outgunned by the professionals that sit around the table.
That's really, really good. That's absolutely fascinating. Thank you, David. That's a really amazing way to hear the voice of the actual consumer. Now, Kerri, I know that your journey, of course, you provide a different service, but I'm really interested for you to share your journey about the voice of the consumer, because you actually started by posing the question following your evaluation, which I thought was terrific, as to actually who is the consumer.
Yeah.
And I'd love for you to share with us your work about discovering who the consumer is, and then some of your tips for residential and how to bring that voice to the table. So I love you, and you need to speak up into the microphone.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, that's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. Look, as with David, you know, we've been on a real journey around clinical governance, and one of the learnings out of this is you may start off with this structure, but you may end up with a whole completely different structure. And I think you learn along the way around it. And I can tell you, you know, we've been on a massive journey around clinical governance, and probably over the last 2 years, we've actually turned everything upside down, and the consumer has become the centre of everything that we actually do. And sometimes there's a conflict between what the consumer wants, and there's a conflict between the consumers as well, and what professional medical staff actually want as well. So, and how do you partner those together? It's been a real journey for us. But you're right, Fee, we started thinking about who our consumer was, and we've got various consumers, but two big parts is our residents and also their families, and sometimes they're very different, and you have to actually merge those together. Some of the stuff that we've actually done over the last 12 months is we've actually worked out what our model of care actually is, and the consumer is the centre of it, and we've actually called it the relationship model of care. And that relationship.
What was that, Kerri? You've called it the what?
It's called the relationship model of care.
Oh, good.
And it covers that our staff have relationships with our residents, but they also have relationships with our staff. And if those are with their families, and the emphasis that sits behind it is that our staff become an extension of the family. Now, if you've got that going on, you've got a real social inclusion environment actually happening, and you can actually deal, and things happen in healthcare, we all know that, but if you've got that relationship, you can actually work through those issues and mitigate the risks associated with it. So that's a lot of work that we've been doing over the last 12 months. And to do that, we've done a lot of work around our values. We've turned our values upside down as well, and worked with our residents and with our staff in the development of our values as well. From a board perspective, how do we bring the consumer into the table, and how do we know the true consumer voice, everybody's voice? And we've been doing some work around that. The last couple of years, we've actually been rolling out the ASCOT tool, which is a validated assessment tool that looks at what the consumer, how the consumer feels and what the consumer wants. Yeah, so we've been rolling that out, and I have to say, we've seen huge improvements around engagement and the consumer having control over their life. So when the board sees that data, they can actually see that the model of care that we're actually implemented, and some of the work that we've been doing strategically around our built form, they can actually see the results that are coming through. That's
good. That is fantastic. And what I love, I love David's point about not just having one poor lone consumer. I love the notion, David, of having a group of people and you know, that just solves so many problems. But also, Kerri, I love the hard work you've done on actually defining who is our consumer and turning that whole model upside down. And I know that David at ECH, you've done a lot of work on your values as well.
I think when you work in residential care, we've got a lot of consumers that have got cognitive impairment. So how do you measure how happy they are with your service?
Yes.
And are you delivering services that meet their needs? And that's one of the reasons why we use the ASCOT tool, because it actually does measure that. So it does measure, you know, what the impact of care is having on that resident. Yeah.
Yes, look, I agree with you. And also, does the ASCOT tool cover asking the consumer, particularly the impaired ones, their family or carers or extra people as well? Is that how it works?
No, you have to do a different survey with families, okay? Because the families have different perceptions to what a resident has. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's terrific. Thank you both so much. They are great insights, and I can tell you this is a very. It doesn't matter which sector we're in, engaging but genuinely engaging with our consumers is a massive question. And I know for a fact that the new framework, the new quality framework, and all of the new accreditation processes, talk to anybody about the areas that they're failing at the moment, they are related to the consumer and our way and ability to engage with them. And I don't think it matters if you're a health organisation with aged care or whether you're just aged care alone. All of us are being asked to lift our game in this area and prove that we're lifting our game. So thank you for those great insights and examples of what you're doing. The next area that naturally flows on from the clinical governance is risk management. And look, one of the things that I know very much from working with boards across health and aged care is that when it comes to clinical governance, what we need to know, whether we're on a health board or an aged care board, is what are our top risks around clinical governance, and how do you, very clever CEOs, help us on the boards have those reported to us in a way that assures us, in other words, in a way that we can somehow get some sleep at night, and very importantly, that when you do have those jolly drop-in accreditations and you do have the call to action from the Commission, that you are ready. And I was absolutely thrilled, Kerri and David, you've both been so generous and you've given us examples of some of the dashboard reporting that you do to your board. Obviously, we have an example here in a de-identified way, but it would just be incredibly helpful to everybody. Kerri, if you could just take us through, how have you highlighted the top risks in clinical governance, and what are they in a nutshell, and how do you report them to your board? And I've got this slide up here of some of your amazing work, so thank you very much.
Yeah, look, I have to say, you know, the dashboard report, as you're seeing, has grown over many years.
Yes, I can just imagine.
Yeah, and there's a lot of data sitting behind this as well. But you know, one of the things that I always think about when I'm looking at risk is what keeps me awake at night.
Yes.
Yeah, and you know, what are the incident reports that are actually coming through? And you know, when you're working in residential care, some of your top risks are your fracture rates. You know, and lots of information falls out of that. If you've got high fracture rates, what are we doing about our falls management at the ground? Have we got the have we got the right equipment and have we got the right infrastructure sitting there? You know, if I look at, you know, I've been in this industry for 38 years and, you know, I've worked in mental health as well, aged psychiatry, and I can tell you, you know, the top three ones that I really look at is calls, your aggression and medication.
Did you say aggression?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Aggression is a huge issue in when you're looking after people with cognitive impairment, and it's usually the resident-to-resident aggression that's the problem. So, you know, and it makes you think about what sort of environmental interventions have you got in place. Yeah.
It's interesting, I see here on your dashboard you've got resident to resident, resident to staff,
Yeah.
and what number of aggression incidents is occurring. Yeah, so that's interesting.
The KPIs change according to what we see coming through our incident reports.
Okay.
If I look at aggression, you know, a couple of years ago we had a massive issue with aggression actually happening through ADLs, through showers, and we implemented a program around a hands-off type of approach to care. And after we rolled it out, we saw a massive decrease in the number of incidents that actually happened in showers. Yeah,
that's incredible. That's incredible, and of course,
that's how you can use data to see whether, because education is really expensive.
Yes.
That's how you can use it to actually measure whether you've actually been successful or not. For example, you know, I'm just waiting for some data to actually come through. We've just actually built a purpose-built dementia unit, and anecdotally, what I'm seeing at the moment is our resident aggression has actually just dropped off massively.
That's terrific.
It tells me that the design is right. Yeah.
But what I love about this dashboard that I'm looking at, if you look at aggression and then you come across what would make me comforted as a director is you've obviously been measuring it month on, month in, month out.
Yeah.
And then you've got whether or not it's up or down, and that would immediately reassure you as a director. And of course, would you give these reports also when you have accreditation?
Yeah. You'll actually see in our accreditation, you'll actually see more data. You'll actually see 3 years of data. When we go for full accreditation, they'll actually see 3 years of data, because then you start seeing trends.
Yes.
So the dashboards that are going on a monthly basis to the board are just identifying the risks there and then about every 6 months we actually present the whole lot to the board.
All the risks that you're managing. Okay.
All the data over a 6, because then you start looking at trends. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
And does this all come from the quality committee?
It all comes from we've got a quality unit that actually does all this, but all this is generated out of our incident reporting system. Yeah. So. That's the fundamentals. You really have to have your systems and processes in place, and technology plays such an important part, and it's a huge investment. And that's one of the things when I go to the board, we've spent a lot of money. It scares me. We spent a lot of money on technology.
Yes.
But it also, it protects you, because you can actually get information. If the board doesn't have information, they can't make informed decisions and they can't identify risk.
Yes. So one of the things is, even if you're a very small aged care service, these indicators would apply also, wouldn't they? You know,
all of these would apply. You know, I used these when I was in mental health, when I was in aged psychiatry, and I use them in aged care as well. So it doesn't matter where you are. Many of these indicators you would use. You would adapt them, of course, for the community. Community would have a different set, but yes, it's very similar. Yeah.
That's really helpful, because one of the things I know since the Royal Commission that on our hospital boards, a lot of our hospitals have aged care units as well, and it's just making sure that everybody is starting to understand not just to have acute indicators, but to also have some of our aged care indicators at the table as well. It's really, really important. And I think these good, practical, sensible ones, Kerri, thank you so much. And David, for you, I mean, obviously your indicators, there's some different indicators for you, but how do you report to your board? Firstly, how do you help your board know what the top risks are? And then how do you report to the board, in particular for you, in line with your own CEO KPIs? Because I guess for you, you feel that the buck stops with you, and then you tell the board how that's going.
Yeah, and I think it's, I mean, a couple of things really.
I'll get you to speak into the microphone too, David, sorry.
Yeah, no, a couple of things. I think as Kerri's already indicated, I mean, within the sort of home care world, it's a slightly different frame of reference. And so part of the journey that my board has been on has been in trying to work through the risks, the clinical risks in relation to home care. And in a context where you are not in control of the environment in which the person lives, and you're also, because we're very much based on a human rights approach, and therefore how do you respect the individual's right to determine for themselves what risks they want to take. So, you know, at the very practical level, we can go into somebody's home and see a rug on the floor that's a potential trip hazard. We absolutely have a responsibility to point that out as a potential risk hazard to a trip and a fall. But we have no power to remove the rug. We can't nail it down. You know, it's down then to the individual. And I'm raising that as a specific example because we were using some of those inherited processes that we had in place when we used to run residential aged care. And that started to throw up some odd issues because we were recording a fracture in that context. And yet we had no control over preventing that fracture in that way. So we had to work through what are the risks to us as an organisation, what is a risk that's shared with the individual and the responsibility they take, and that is shaping the sorts of reporting and the dashboards that we take. Coming from a very different place, one of my 5 KPIs as a chief executive is how many good and respectful deaths at home we achieve for our clients per year. And so again, that's been something which is clearly dashboarded to the board. And the reverse of that being that if somebody has expressed that wish to have a good and respectful death at home and doesn't achieve that because they've ended up in hospital or they have migrated into residential aged care, then that in our terms is a failure that we do a root cause analysis on to understand what led to that person's wish not actually being achieved. And again, that is helping my board understand some of the intricacies of clinical governance within that community context, as opposed to within the 4 walls of an institution, yes. And how they then assess the level of risk and what reassurance they require to deal with that. And that's very much, you know, going back to my earlier comment about setting up the quality group as a subcommittee of the board to work through what is a good and respectful death. That's helping inform what the risk matrix is associated with that for the board to make an informed view as to where to draw the line, which will then inform our future reporting processes. So we're still very much in that sort of discovery phase, if you like, in terms of our true mission for where the we go in terms of the content of our new dashboards for risk management. We've got some traditional ones, which are not dissimilar to what Kerri has put forward. But for us, it's now thinking about what next that truly captures our mission about enabling people to remain at home until death.
Terrific. But David, that's so incredibly helpful. Thank you. And both coming from different perspectives, but the similarity is the way that you're working through it. And what I take great comfort from and listening to you both is the journey that you're on to discover this. I mean, I love Kerri's point about this dashboard was an awful lot smaller a couple of years ago. And David, you're very much on that journey of discovering what are the risks related to the business you're in and how do you then report that up to the board. So I guess the strong message is there are some sensible indicators, but more importantly, don't be afraid to go onto that journey to discover what they should be and what they should look like, particularly if we have the consumer at the middle of the centre of care.
And don't be frightened of risk, you know, like this business is risky. It's just how much risk are you able to tolerate? Yeah. And clients, and like the new standards are all about the client to be able to take risk, but is that risk informed risk? Yeah.
That's it. It's about informed risk. I agree. So last but not least, another area that is the natural flow on from all of this, and this comes from working with you both, but also from our years of experience with evaluation with boards, is that directors genuinely feel that they can be more strategic and more capable in overseeing risk when they actually understand and know better the business they're in. And probably one of the final points that I'd like to ask you both about today is how do you both work with and assist your directors to be more strategic as opposed to operational? And I can really get it that we are operational at the moment as directors because there's an awful lot of microscopes looking at us at the moment with accreditation, the commission, and just the fact that we want to do a better job or continue to do a great job with our elderly community members. But what do you both do, and what are some of the great initiatives that your board has come up with this year in relation to actually the board itself developing better knowledge of the business they're in, therefore a better understanding of the risk? David, I'd love to start with you. I know your board has been doing some extraordinary things, so how does the board get to know about home care? So talk to me about some of the things that you guys are all doing in this area at the moment.
So again, sort of reflecting the context in which ECH is working with that sort of home care component, it's been very challenging for my directors on the board to feel in touch with the business in the sense that they can't go into people's homes and see what's happening. In the way that you can go into a residential facility, a hospital, etc. So they have had to think creatively about how to get that insight, and that goes back to the debate about consumers and people with lived experience. I've also said that my directors are fairly sophisticated in terms of their understanding of their role, and if anything, for me, it's been the reverse of the board straying into operational matters and doing too much strategy. Because again, as the chief executive, I think we have to have time to implement strategy, and we can't changing strategy every 5 minutes because of a bright idea that a board member has had. So again, very effective working with the chair to manage that. And I think the most interesting thing that we have done in the last couple of months post the evaluation to work with that is we have a board and executive combined sort of annual strategy day. It normally falls around sort of end of November, as it did this year. And in previous years, it's been the directors in receiving mode and executive doing the presentations. And this year we flipped it. And we basically said, you're the board, you're strategic, you've come onto the board because of the experience and what you bring to our skills matrix that we require on the board. So we've, you know, for our housing side, we've got a property development expert, we've got marketing experts, we've got that clinician. And so we did, as I say, the reverse. They were tasked with doing the presentation, and this was very much focused on the 5 to 10 year horizon, not the immediate forward strategy, because we've already got that in place and we're implementing. But what happens next? What's that 5 to 10 year? And what do you bring from your experience outside of ECH that might help inform what we don't yet know about and we're not yet thinking about planning for into the future? And so it was a great day because it allowed the directors to demonstrate what they brought and their degree of their strategic thinking and relevance to the business of ECH. The executive had a great day because they weren't under pressure to produce. We were all in listening mode. And we actually came up with a number of key initiatives out of that, which I don't think we would have done had we done the traditional thing. And my chair was very keen to do that because, you know, to do it in the way we did it, because she wanted, on the back of the evaluation, to see that as part of the development needs of the directors.
That's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And David, I know from working with you that your chair has also instigated that, is it every third meeting you have extra time for your directors to talk about or to have someone in to help people learn more about the industry?
That's right. So it's about, again, because there's a recognition that there's a tendency for the main, you know, font of wisdom on the industry to be the chief exec, bringing that into the board. And apart from going to things like Laser Congress, etc., most of my board don't really get an opportunity to interact on a more regular basis with other people within the sector. And so, yes, so one of the other tactics that's been developed is that every third meeting, so quarterly essentially, to invite somebody or another organisation, be it the Aged Care Financing Authority, somebody representing them, or the Quality Agency, or whatever, into the board so that they have an additional sort of strategy, information, thinking time, as well as the general business that gets dealt with through the board.
That's terrific. Thank you so much, David. That's really interesting. And Kerri, likewise, you've done some extraordinary things, your board. I was just wondering, could you give us a couple of examples of some of the things you guys have done to help your board understand the business they're in and being a completely different kind of business to David's?
Yeah, look, we've done some similar things to David. I like the idea of the directors presenting. I might put that to them.
Yes, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. They have to do their homework it would be terrific. Yeah.
What was interesting was that it probably was more time consuming for me personally because all of the directors who were presenting put in several slots with myself to talk through, which is, again, partly because they wanted to test out what they should, what the focus should be, but also because all of them were really keen not to say anything by accident or default that undermined sort of where we were going in our current implementation. So they're very mindful and respectful of that, which was good.
Yeah.
Terrific.
Yeah, we do some similar stuff to you, David. I do bring in key speakers into the board meetings, so they just don't hear it from the CEO. They actually hear it from other people as well. But I'm not mad that this is how other people are actually thinking as well. We do have our annual strategic planning days, and the executive all come together. And I usually get that done by someone outside of the organisation, because it's really important, I feel, that it's not just hearing from the CEO or from the executive. I think they need to see what's going on outside of other organisations, outside of your organisation. What are other people doing? What are the challenges? What are the risks? All those sorts of things, and that really has coloured or framed our capital plans and our clinical governance, our structures, and all that kind of stuff as well. Because it's really good to hear from the Stuart Browns and from the leaders in clinical practice, all those sorts of things. So we've done a lot of that, and the directors love it. Our last strategic planning day went off really well. So, and they're also about the directors getting to know us as well. So yeah. I also some of the stuff I'm doing this year is writing a thought paper, and it's a thought paper that the directors read prior to actually coming into a strategic planning day. So we've got them thinking before they come into the day. Yeah.
Terrific. That's great. Thanks, Kerri. That's really helpful. And when I was chatting with you both prior to you both so generously being able to be available to share all your tips and thoughts for today, I had a bit of a chat to you both, and we came up with some key take-home messages from today. So, Kerri, I wondered if you just read the first four for me, because they're very much what you want people to take home. And David, I'll just get you to read the last three, just for people to have these overall take-home messages from today.
Look, I think given everything that's coming at us, I don't think we can actually sit there and hope it's going to go over the top of us. I think it's really important that we've got a culture of continuous review and development, and that we don't stop. That change is coming at us. We need to be prepared for it, and part of that is continuously reviewing and developing your services. Everything is about the consumer these days, so it's about bringing that consumer to the table and understanding who your consumer is and what the different consumers want as well. So, and you can do that through various surveys. You can do it all different ways. Different services will have different ways of doing it. You don't necessarily have to have a consumer sitting around the table. You can get consumer feedback in all different sorts of ways. As a director, you don't need to know everything that's going on in the business, but I want to know, as if I was a director, I want to know what my top risks are. Yeah. And sometimes I've been in organisations where I've said, well, you tell me what the top 10 risks are, and how are you going to report on those as well. That's some of the stuff we do around the board. We sort of thresh out with the executive what are the top risks, and understand the business. You can't, as a director or an executive for that, sit there and not understand the business internally and externally, and be strategic about your thinking. Yeah.
Thanks, Kerri. And David, if I could just get you to share the last three.
Yeah, I mean, I think that whichever way you look at it, over 2019, if not beyond, is going to be tough for the sector. I think whilst we know the tone that the commissioners in the Royal Commission want to strike, we've yet to see what that looks like in practice, and how the outside world and the media are going to respond to that. And we've only seen, even before the first day of the Commission hearing tomorrow, we've already had in the last week or so more sort of scare stories, horror stories, So it's inevitable going to be, for me, I think, that boards and organisations are going to be nervous and anxious over the coming period. And so part of getting the resilience and dealing with that is about being open to share and learn from others. Each organisation's got its strengths and its weaknesses. And the only way we actually improve overall, both as individual organisations and as a sector, is by sharing and learning. And that requires us to be open and have that willingness and appetite to share and learn. And that's where at the executive level as well as at the board level. Building the board relationships. So I think for me, there are three key relationships. There's the relationship between the chief executive and their chair. There's the relationship between the members of the board. And there's also the specific relationship of the chair to the other board members. And it's often a triangulation. The chair is often in that sort of fulcrum position, trying to ensure that the board is kept together, but also trying to support the chief executive. But building those relationships is critical, because if you don't have the good quality relationships, then that undermines a lot of the potential good work that a board can be doing. And part of that good relationship is being prepared to challenge in a respectful and open way, because again, too many things potentially go under the wire because people just don't raise the issue. They don't want to be seen to be offending or challenging by saying something which might be perceived as inappropriate or difficult. And at the end of the day, never lose sight of your purpose. We're in this business for a particular reason, and that we have to stay strong to that and keep that focus. And that needs to inform the culture of the organisation, and that includes the board. And if the board don't have that tattoo on their wrist of why they're there to keep looking at, then I suggest you go and get them all tattooed.
That's fantastic. Kerri and David, we want to thank you both so much for your amazing tips and insight and really helpful conversations today. We have hope that this series we're kicking off in 29 will enable people to share and grow and support each other to continue excellence in aged care, or those who provide aged care services. And I've just put up here our email that I'd love everyone. Email us, tell us if you want some more of this, tell us how you'd like to hear more tips, more interesting things in the future. But really, David and Kerri, for today, thank you both so much. It's a really big thing that you do to give us your time and your years of valuable experience, and we are incredibly grateful. And everybody who has come today will receive a copy of this video and also a template of the fabulous dashboard reports that Kerri and David were talking about before. So I just want to thank you both so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
To share.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you for coming today to our webinar, and we'll see you in the second part of our series.